In the late 90s, an author named Ray Oldenburg wrote a book that was very influential for me when it came to the idea of starting this church. The book was called The Great Good Place. And the idea behind the book is that we all need a third place to exist in life. Your first place is home, your second place is work, and we need this third place to just kind of hang out. Now, that idea of a third place also inspired Howard Schultz, the CEO and founder of Starbucks. And so he took the idea of we need this third place, hangout place, this place where everybody knows your name, and we need that in American society. And that was actually the dream behind Starbucks. Really, I mean, besides all money and coffee and all the things, but like the dream was let's create this space where people could come together and get to know each other. Now, I used to be a manager for Starbucks, so this was important to me. I loved that idea. I didn't even like coffee, but I loved the idea of like coming together. I've repented. I like coffee now, but back then I did not. And so it was a cool idea, like this connection, third place idea. I was all for it. Unfortunately, Starbucks now, 90% of all orders at Starbucks are drive-through or carry-out. So the idea of a place that you come together to hang out is kind of, I think, sort of dead and gone, at least there, which is unfortunate. But I think maybe the quintessential third place idea you can probably see from the 90s sitcom Friends, right? Y'all remember, if you've seen Friends or you've seen it on rerun on Netflix or whatever, if you remember, now, when I saw Friends in the 90s, it was the funniest thing on TV. I've gone back and watched it a little bit, and it doesn't hold up quite like I remember. I'm like, I think this was funnier than Pivot. Yeah, like this isn't that funny. But if you remember the show, or you've seen the show, you know that the dream of it, the idea of it, or what makes it so compelling is it's a group of friends that all hang out together, and they did hang out in their homes, in their super realistic on a barista salary in Manhattan, 5,000 square foot apartments. They hung out there. I'm sure they were rent controlled. It was fine. They hung out there, and then, but the place they're hanging out a lot. Do you remember the name of the cafe? Central Perk, right? Which I think is what Starbucks was trying to be. Was trying to be Central Perk of like culture or whatever in every neighborhood. It was a neat idea that there's this place where everybody knows your name. You come together, you gather as friends. But I actually think the glue of the whole thing really is not the place itself. It's the relationships. When you have that group of people that you're tight with, that are there with you in the good times and the bad, that's what we're actually all looking for. And that's what we're still looking for. You can go to the gym every week and not develop those relationships. You can go to the same dog park and not develop relationships. You could go to a brewery and not develop relationships. Like, the place itself is not going to necessarily get it for you. And in the same way, you can attend a church. You can show up, you can worship, you can sing, you can pray, you can give, and you can kind of go through the motions of that. But unless you develop relationship, it's not going to be that place for you. You're not going to find your people. You're not going to connect unless you kind of dive in a little bit deeper. I actually think this is what we long for. The reason Friends was so compelling, humor aside, was we long for that community. Man, I just want to have my people. I want to find my people, the people that know me, that I know them, because sometimes, life feels like you're stuck in second gear, and it hasn't been your day or your week or your month or even your year. How'd you know I was going to say that? Weird. Like, that's what life is like, and that's the idea. We all need to find our people and connect, that group of people that are our core people. We want those who are with us in the good times and in the bad. So in this series, we're diving into that idea. And we started with this idea of these three circles. If we have them, I'll put them on the screen. I don't know. Yeah, here we go. So core, community, and crowd. We have in our circle of relationships, you have a crowd of people that know you. Maybe these are Facebook friends, acquaintances, just people that you know their name, they know you. They met you that one time. That's the crowd. It's this large group of people. And then within that, you've got a community of people that's maybe 12 to 50 people that a little better, a little tighter. You have conversations maybe a little more regularly. And then beyond that, we even have a group of 3 to 5 people that are just our core. These are our people. And we looked at last week that Jesus had this. He had the crowds that were following him. He had a community. He even had 12 of closest disciples. They were called the apostles. And then even within that, he had 3 that were kind of his inner circle that he could go really deep with. And we said last week, hey, this is a model for us too. We all need this. And we talked about that Jesus had it, so it's a theological idea, but we looked at sociology and some of the science behind it. There's a lot of people kind of saying that these are kind of how relationships split out in our lives, and this is, maybe I would argue, this is the way we grow. So in this series, we want to challenge you to find your people, and we're going to lean into it a bit. Topher, I thought, just did a fantastic job explaining the different kinds of groups that we have here, and so we are going to make space for everyone. We want you to find your people here. And find some people that might be your core. Not everybody's going to be your core, but some people can. And we want to create an environment for that to happen, that you can get to know people, that you can know and be known, love and be loved, right? That's a beautiful thing, and we want to see that happen here. And there's different kinds of groups. Now, we're gonna set the table for that. The group signups are live. The formation groups will go live this week as well. We're going to do a charcuterie event after church on Sunday, September 8th. In just a couple weeks, we're going to do that. That's a connection event. We want you to come find your people, find a group to be a part of. We will literally set the table for you, but you're going to have to pick up a fork. You're going to have to say, okay, I want this, and I'm going to make an effort here, and I'm going to go for it. So today, I want to talk about, last week we talked about the amount of hours it takes to get a core group of friends. Today, I want to talk about another aspect of developing deeper relationships, and to do so, I want to go to a story in the Old Testament, which is one of the heaviest in the Old Testament, and really one of the heaviest in all of ancient literature. It's the story of the book of Job, which, even if you haven't read it, you've probably heard it referenced, and it's typically referenced in a way of like when bad things happen to good people kind of thing, and understandably so when you dive into it. So we're going to read a bit of it in chapters 1 and 2. I want to just kind of walk you through it, and I want to talk to you specifically about how friendship shows up and how the core group shows up in this story. So Job chapter 1, verse 1. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. All right, main character is introduced, guy named Job, and all we know about him so far is where he lives and that he's awesome. He's a good dude. He loves God. It says he fears God. So it's not just like, oh, God is my friend, he's my buddy. It's like, oh, okay, like God is powerful, and there's a healthy fear there. That is a good thing. That the scripture over and over will talk about the fear of the Lord as the beginning of wisdom and this knowledge. And the way we will grow is first understand who you are and understand you're not God. Understand who God is and understand your place with Him as your Father and you're His child. Like that is a great thing. So Job is a good dude, and we see that. Verse 2. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys, and very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all people of the East. So in the ancient world, this is a wealthy guy. So he fears God, he's wealthy, he's got a lot going on kind of in his culture. And if you go on and read, he's a good father, he's a good steward of all the resources that God has given him. And so he's a worthy, just all-around good guy. However, he's so good, he actually gets Satan's attention. In Job 1:8, it says this: "There is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil." Satan comes to God and says, hey, here's this guy, and he's, great, and God is sort of bragging about him. I mean, imagine that you are living a life so good that God is like, have you looked at her? She's doing it. She's killing it down there. She's just like following. She's humble, fair, honest. He's doing such a good job. Like whatever. Like imagine your life gets the attention of the heavenly realms, right? Of this other part of the universe where God is going. Job is really doing a great job. And Satan notices, and is like, don't super love that. And so verse 13, let me continue reading on. It says, now there was a day, so Satan's like, let me test Job. Let's see how this really goes. And so verse 13, now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And there came a messenger to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them, and the Sabaeans fell upon them and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. So Satan takes notice of how good Job is, and basically Satan's like, oh, Job only follows you, God, because you're good to him. What if you stop being good to him? What if you take away things? Will he still follow you? And so Satan goes out to do his worst to Job, and all of his animals are a marauding band comes in and like wipes out his animals, and this one servant gets away to come tell him. That's horrible. It gets worse. Verse 16. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Man, when that stuff starts going down, you know you're having a bad day. When fire of God is falling, this is beyond normal. Like, this is not good at all. And it actually gets worse. Verse 17, while he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. This is just getting worse. And then in verse 18, it says this, while he was yet speaking, there came another and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they are dead, and I alone have escaped to tell you. This is horrible. And notice that the losses Job is taking here are not his fault. He's getting invaded by other groups in the region, and there's natural disasters and acts of God. You could argue like fire from heaven, like there's wind blows the house down, like there's just stuff. And it's not like Job did something stupid and he's paying the consequences. This is just stuff happening to him. And he didn't ask for any of this. He didn't live a horrible life that he deserved any of it. Like, there's none of that. And it's horrible. And Job is just, as you would be, absolutely crushed that within moments his life has completely unraveled. Verse 20, then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshiped. So Job's response was in part misery. It's a cultural thing to tear your robes in that culture. It's a sign of like, I'm undone. I am destroyed here. This is the worst it can be. And he tears his robes and he falls down on the ground. And then it says, strangely enough, he worships. And somehow in the midst of that, he's going to turn back to God, which really is who Job was at the beginning of the story. Even all these things have happened, he's still worshiping God. And Satan goes after him again and starts physically attacking Job himself. Chapter 2, verse 7. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with loathsome sores from the side of his foot to the crown of his head, and he took a piece of broken pottery with which to scrape himself while he sat in the ashes. That's about as low as it gets, right? Everything's been taken away from you, and now your health is gone. There's so much pain. Loathsome sores is the way it's described. I got a bad ankle right now, and let me just tell you, I complain about it all the time to anybody who will listen. I can't imagine loathsome sores from head to toe, right? And that's what he has. And it's so bad, you picture him sitting in the ashes of a burnt-down house with death around him, taking broken pottery and scraping the sores in an attempt to make them feel better. Now, this is where you want your spouse to come along, if you're married, and be like, turn that frown upside down, Job, or something, right? Like, it'll be okay. We can get through this. This is what she says, verse 9. Then his wife said to him, do you still hold fast your integrity? Curse God and die. I always read that and I'm like, how would you like to be married to her? Like, she sounds lovely. You know, if I'm Job, I'm like, I was hoping for a back rub, but okay. I guess that's an option also. Curse God and die. Like, okay. This is heavy stuff. And we're going to talk about your core group of friends here in a second, but I don't want to miss this because this is the classic tale in all of ancient literature about when bad things happen to good people. And it's pretty clear Job's a good person. I mean, if we can all grade that on the curve if we were like, well, maybe he was a little snarky or whatever. He's a good person. And horrible things happen to him that are not a result of his doing. They're not his fault. Satan just unloads on this guy. And it's a mess. And maybe it's overplayed in culture, especially in church culture and Christian culture, to be like, oh, you're like Job right now. But man, we go through it too, right? And maybe you felt this way. Maybe not everything has been taken away, but maybe you've lost that job. And you've lost a spouse. You've lost a child. Maybe you've been in that moment where you're like, this is so dark. This is so broken. And what did I do to deserve this? What is going on here? Why am I just surrounded with so much pain? And you've probably experienced moments in your life or seasons where things just seem to come apart. And I guess what I want to say right now is that God actually doesn't promise that it will be easy. And if someone said to you, follow Jesus and it's going to be easy, they lied to you. I tell people to follow Jesus. I ask people, get baptized, give your life to him, make him the leader of your life. But I hopefully you've never heard me say, and this will be a breeze. Because it's not. It's not. Hard stuff will come. Most of the hard stuff that comes to us, unlike Job, most of the hard stuff that comes to us is the consequences, honestly, of our sin. Like we do stupid things, and then it's like play stupid games, win stupid prizes. We do stupid things, and then we get some consequences we don't like because we chose to do these things. That's most of the consequences in life. But sometimes there is that hurricane. Sometimes that person walks away from you, and you did not sign up for this. Sometimes there's disease that you didn't. That was not about your lifestyle. It happens. Jesus teaches us this. He told his closest followers, he said this, John 16:33, I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Jesus says, it's going to get bad for you. There will be struggles. People will not like you. They will unfriend you in digital ways, but in real ways too. Like, it is not going to go well. Jesus promises that. He doesn't say, like, it's going to be awesome. He says, you will have tribulation. And then he says, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And I think the hope in that is it's going to go badly, but you're on his team. Like, if you follow Jesus, it's like, I don't like this. I don't like the way this is going. This is not what I would choose. And I'm sure Job could say that too. It's not what I would choose, but okay, I'm with you, Jesus. And somehow you have overcome. And since I'm on your team, I get to overcome as well, eventually, and in some way. And that's hard. It's hard when we're in it. It's hard to be like, great, also I have Jesus. Is he helping right now? Because everything's coming unraveled. And I get that when we're in it. But it is still true. God is with us in our pain. God is with us in our pain. And knowing that should bring us some level of peace. I suffer too. I walk through this like you do. I have a wife. I have 3 sons. And the more you put your love out there, the more opportunity you have for pain. My family brings me great joy. But anytime you love somebody, there's opportunity for great pain, isn't there? This is why love is so risky. To put yourself out there and love someone is to open yourself up to pain. And it's challenging. And so I understand suffering as well. And what I've said at this church and what I want to remind you of is Jesus never promises to make the suffering go away. He just promises to make the suffering count. That it will actually build something in you. It will grow something in you. Now, I'm sure if I'm Job in the moment, if I'd gone to Job and been like, Job, all this suffering is a great growth opportunity for you. Probably not the move. Not that. That's because, if I'm Job, I'm like, I wish God would give that growth opportunity to somebody else because I don't want it, which I totally get. But I do believe, And Jesus promises us that he's with us in the pain, and he's going to make the suffering count, and in some way that's going to deepen us. So Job loses just about everything in his life, and we get a little insight into how he feels about this. He says this in verse 21, chapter 1. He said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." In all of this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. This is wild that he loses everything, and this is still his attitude. And then even after his wife said what she said to him, he says in response to her, "Shall we accept from God, good from God and not trouble?" And all this, Job did not sin in what he said. Job is, she says, "You should just curse God and die." And Job's response is, I can have good days that God gave me. Should I accept those and not accept bad as well? Like, let's be realistic here. Like, this is the way relationships are. There's ups and there's down. There's good and there's bad. And if you're in a real relationship with the real God, it's not all arrows going up and to the right all the time. Like, there are dark things you're going to have to walk through. And he promises that he will be there with us as we walk through the dark stuff. And I think that's a profound aspect of a real relationship. So, that aside, let me tell you about Job's core group that shows up for him in the lowest of low places that he's in right there. His squad rolls up, right? And they are there with him. Job chapter 2, verse 11. "Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that had come upon him, they came each from his own place." Here's what you need to know about your core group. Number 1 is this: your core people show up. Your core people show up. These guys leave their families in that moment because their friend Job is going through it. And they leave their families, they leave their job, they leave whatever, and they're just like, "I'm going to show up and be there." And I think this is an underrated aspect of good core friends, that they are there for you in the good times and in the bad. And if your friends are only there for you in the good times and they leave you when things are bad, those aren't friends. They're just good time hangout buddies, right? You need someone who, in your core, that is with you when things go dark for you. They're like, "I'm going to go there with you. This is dark. I'll show up." Now, we like to joke about that. You've probably seen the meme where people are like, because this is where I think we go too far with it. We're like, I need the kind of friend that can help me bury a body in the middle of the night, It's like that. That's not a friend. That's an accomplice. That's a murder charge. And really, that friend should show up and be like, "Why are you burying a body? What have you done? You're an idiot. Stop." Like, that's a friend. His 3 friends show up, and they have some fun names. Let me read them to you. Verse 11. "Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. They made an appointment together to come to show him sympathy and comfort for him." Those are fun names, let's be honest. If you want Bible names for your child, there are options there as we're baby naming. And also, it's thousands of years ago in a different culture and translated from a different language than ours, so I'm sure those names were beautiful in Hebrew or whatever. But in English, thousands of years later, we're like, that's weird. And let's be honest, some of our names are going to sound pretty weird 100 years from now, right? I saw this thing the other day that said that there was this thing of people naming their children after fonts. There's a kid named Papyrus walking around out there. This is really weird, right? We're doing this in the real world. Now, I'm not saying you should all name your kids Chris, because that probably sounds silly 100 years from now. It was actually funny, 3 Sundays ago, every guy that was on stage was named Chris. I'm like, what are we doing, guys? We need to, let's figure this out. But yeah, so they have these odd names, and I think years from now our names will look silly too. So verse 12, "And when they saw," here's what they do when they show up. "When they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him. And they raised their voices and wept, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads towards heaven." So if number 1, your core people show up, number 2 is this: your core people show empathy. the idea that that people will show up and be with you in it. You've seen people talk about this over the years. Brene Brown has talked about this, pushing this idea front and center. To show empathy is to get down in the pit with someone, to just really get in it. Not to look at them from above, down in their pit, and be like, sucks for you down there. Sorry that's happening. But to actually climb down the ladder, sit there in the bottom of the pit, and go like, all right, let's just sit in this. This is horrible, and I'm sorry you're in it. Job's people, his core, they show up for him, and they wail, they cry, they tear their clothes. Notice what they don't do when they show up. They don't get down in that pit with him. They don't go, I mean, God has a plan. Every cloud has a silver lining. Like well-meaning Christian people say things when people are in pain to try to make them feel better. And I understand why we do that. But I think a lot of times the reason we say things to people to try to make them feel better when they're in the pit is because we feel bad when they're in the pit and we don't want to feel bad anymore. And so it almost becomes about us. My mirror neurons are firing. You're in the pit. I feel like I'm in the pit now too. Let's relieve this for both of us. I'm going to say a thing, and hopefully that will help get us out. And I get why we do this. But Job's friends, at least at first, do not do that. Listen to what happens, verse 13. And they sat with him on the ground. Get this. They sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. Maybe the best thing you can do is show up and shut up. Really? Like, that's what they do. They just sit there. There's a painting, and for a while it was at the VMFA, just blocks away from here. It's a French painting called The Friends of Job. I want to show it to you. We'll put it on the screen. I love this painting. And I used to tell people, go to the VMFA and see this painting, except now they have it like in a basement warehouse or I don't know, something. But Job is lying in the corner, like naked, in like a crucifixion pose, right? Like that's intentional. And he is laying in the ash, and there's broken buildings around him. And his 3 friends are there. They're just in the shadow, right? And I love this image of they're just like, all right, I'm just going to sit here. You're in it. It's not there. It's not turn that frown upside down. This is, I will just sit here and be in it with you. And your core group of friends are people who can just sit in it with you. When you lose your job and you're in pain about it, they don't show up and go, just fix up your resume and put it right back out there. Maybe that's a solution for another day, but not right now. If your spouse walks out, they don't go, you should get on a dating app and just get back in the game. That might be a solution for another day, but not right now. You need people who will just sit with you in it and in the pain. Now, I'm going to stop there because if you keep reading about Job's friends in the rest of the book, they start talking and saying things to him, and they probably just should not have. They were peaking right here at not saying anything, and then for the rest of the book, they start dispensing advice, most of which is bad. They're like, Job, have you considered that all this happened because it's your fault and you made God mad? It's like they're doing things like that weren't ever so helpful. You can go back and read the book later. But I just want to focus on this moment. They're in it, and we need people who will show up for us when we're in this dark place, and we need that core. Now, I'm tempted to say, if I thought about the genders here, I'm tempted to say men struggle more than women to have a core group, to have that 3 or 5 friends. Women, everyone always says, women are more relational and they connect and whatever, and so ostensibly, women are way better at this, that men are lonely and they struggle and they don't have relationships. They don't have that person who will walk with them in the darkest night of their soul. And I think that is true that men have that. But I actually think women struggle with it also, maybe in a little bit of a different way. But I think what men do, if we're thinking about our 3 circles, I think men have a crowd and they pretend that it's a community, or they call it a community. And women have a community and they pretend that it's a core and they call it a core. But in reality, we're all falling short of driving down to that next level and getting a little deeper in those relationships so that we truly have that core group. I think we all struggle with this for similar reasons. And I think maybe one of the big reasons that we struggle with this is last week I talked about to get a core group, you literally need time. Like to have that core group, 3 to 5 friends, the sociology study said you need about 200 hours with someone to really drive you into that kind of relationship. But that's not the only piece. That's a main piece. But a second piece that you need to drive into a deeper core relationship is vulnerability. You need vulnerability with people. Now, there's maybe a couple ways we could define vulnerability, but I'll just use this one. Vulnerability is capable of being wounded. You need to be in a position with people, not everybody, but some people, where you open yourself up to the point that you could be wounded, that what you say they could use against you if they wanted to, if they were those kind of people. And man, that stuff is scary. The vulnerability is scary. Men struggle with this, okay, for sure. Men struggle with it. We're taught to be tough, never let them see you sweat, that kind of thing. So there's a cultural pressure to not show it. But I think women struggle with it too, right? You're told to be 100 different things and to be perfect and to have it all together and look a certain way and be a girl boss on top of being this family person and then be a mom or not, or like all this pressure that women feel as well to be a certain way. And what that pressure does for men and women is drive them to not ever let them see you sweat, to not be vulnerable, to not really show up. There's a pressure to, hey, I don't know if you have it all together, but you better look like you do, because that's what we want. I don't want real you, I want Instagram version of you that looks like you have it together. So we don't show weakness, and the consequence of that is we don't build relational intimacy. Now, some of us have very good reasons why we don't show vulnerability, and we don't show weakness, and we don't build relational intimacy. We tried that once, and it did not work out. We got very hurt by people who got to know us, and then they cheated on us, they gossiped about us, they hurt us in various ways. And so we sort of vow, I'm never going to get hurt again. In fact, the circles of crowd, community, and core, the lines between those circles are basically the walls that we build to make sure nobody gets access to those other layers. And we build walls. We sort of armor up. We're like, I got hurt. That's not going to ever happen again. I'll make sure nobody ever hurts me. We do this in dating. We do this with family, friendships, coworkers. We do this kind of thing where we armor up and we refuse to be vulnerable. And I get it. It makes sense. Look, we don't have the time, but I have daddy issues too. I have plenty I could talk about of things that went on with my dad that would make me not want to show up and not show weakness. Because to be vulnerable, to allow someone to really know you, to open yourself in a way where you're capable of being wounded, this sounds like risky behavior. It is risky to be known. But what's the alternative to this? What's the alternative to vulnerability and that riskiness? The alternative is to not let anybody know you and to really armor up and keep almost everybody out. And that life is sad and lonely. And some of you know exactly what that's like because you're walking down that road. Some of you can see it in friends and family members who have walked down that road and they're sad and alone. And you go, I don't want to be that, but we're not quite sure how to not be that. We're not quite sure, how do I get there? How do I actually avoid that risk-free, safe, I'm not going to love anyone, I'm not going to let anybody hurt me life? There's risk on all sides of this thing. So why not take the vulnerability risk with someone so that you have the possibility of building a core group of friends? Job's life was hard. It was good and it went way off the tracks. But how much harder would it have been if he had no one to show up for him? How much harder would it have been if that picture is him lying in the corner alone? He had a core group that showed up for him and sat with him in the pain. Here's the truth. You cannot have a core group of friends if you are unwilling to be vulnerable. And that is just so hard. We have to be honest about our mess. That's how true intimacy works. I'm not going to tell you up here all my deepest, darkest secrets. That's not the kind of relation, that's not intimacy, right? It would be odd. It'd be like, oh, right? But I'm going to tell somebody. I'm going to walk through with a small group of people of this is what's hard, this is what's good, this is what's bad. And all of us need that. That's how true intimacy works. True intimacy looks like you get all of me or you get none of me, but let's go for all if we're going to do this. If I have to wear a mask and be something for you, then we're not going to be in the core together. We're not going to be close. If your expectations are I have to show up for you a certain way for you to like me, or I have to wear a mask to be around you, we're just not going to be close. And so we have to think through how vulnerable we're being. So last week I asked you to evaluate your time. Who are you actually pouring yourself into? Is there anyone that you're going to spend 200 hours with, or are you going to find 100 people and spend 2 hours with them and hope that that gets you the depth of relationship that you want? In order to have a core, you need the time, but you have to be vulnerable and pour in. So let's choose that instead of choosing a life of isolation. Let's pray. Jesus, it is difficult to put ourselves out there, to take a risk, to be vulnerable, to show the weakness, to show the wounds, when there are people that will try to capitalize on that or will shame us for those things. And a lot of us have felt that in life. We've walked through it. But God, may we be maybe the virtue we need the most in all of this, may we be courageous. May we be the people who have the courage to get back on the horse, to get into relationship again, to allow people to know us. With the wisdom we've gained from experiences we've had before, may we walk forward and be vulnerable so that we can have that core group of friends. God, for those who feel like, man, if my life came unglued right now, I don't know that I have 3 to 5 people who could sit there and show up with me in the darkness. I pray that this is the beginning then of building that again, to build those kind of relationships, to show up for others that way and to be shown up for in that way. God, may this community build that internally and extend it out to others and draw more people into what we're doing here. Thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.